Reading for Wildlife. Written and illustrated by Zella, a project by Zella and friends. An elephant for breakfast.
Chapter 21, The Hidden Chocolate. Josephine and Rose hurried to the pink house at 1 Paradise Road to join the others. When they arrived, there was no one to be seen. The front door was shut, and they did not have a key. Rose was about to ring the bell when Josephine stopped her. "Is there another way in? We don't want to alert those crooks that we are here," Josephine said. "The element of surprise is always an advantage." "There's a spare key hidden in the garden." Rose led Josephine down the driveway. Josephine was tall enough to reach her hand over the gate and pull the bolt. On entering the garden, they looked up at the house. At first, nothing seemed out of place, but then they saw some shapes through the third-floor window in Aunt Lily and Uncle Crispin's office. Josephine looked pale and scared. They were holding guns. "They want the ivory. They do not want to kill anyone," Rose tried to reassure her. She hoped she was right. Determined, she went into the shed quickly and found the key. Then Rose, Josephine and Lucky quietly slipped through the back door. "Wait. Let's open the front door," whispered Josephine. "Then the police can come straight in." While they were opening the door as quietly as possible, Lucky shot upstairs. Johnny, Bella, Freddie and Tom were in the office, trying really hard not to look at the floor. Under the desk were the 2 flat brass handles of the trapdoor. Bella was convinced that the chocolate must be there. George and Patrick were pulling out drawers, opening cupboards roughly, emptying the contents and threatening their captives with pinches and pokes. There was a slight noise on the stairs, and Lucky burst in, growling. She sprang up on Patrick, causing him to fall backwards and drop his gun. Everyone looked down at the gun, which fell near the brass handles. Quick as a flash, Bella placed her foot on the handle and the other on the gun, so neither George nor Patrick could easily retrieve it. As her hands were tied, she could not pick it up. Bella's attempt to hide the cupboard had been just a fraction too late. Both intruders dived towards the handles and together pulled them up. There lay the dark brown chocolate. They grabbed it. Patrick kissed it and George laughed triumphantly. As they embraced the chocolate, neither noticed Josephine and Rose appear. But what stopped the nasty men in their tracks gave everyone a surprise. It wasn't Rose picking up the gun, her hands trembling as she pointed it to them. It was the stern voice of Josephine. "Patrick Alexander Plum. George Wharton Grimble. What are you doing?" They looked up at her guiltily. "You were such good boys. What about your mother, Patrick? Mrs. Plum was a fine woman. George, what would dear old Ma Grimble say? Didn't she always tell you to keep your nose clean and work hard? Stand up straight. You ought to be ashamed of yourselves." She paused and thought for a moment. Whose idea was this? Who put you up to this? Both men stood up. They blushed. Bella thought that they looked like children caught stealing. "His, GG's," said Patrick, nodding towards George. "No, it was Patrick's idea," said George. "What would you want to do with all that ivory and chocolate?" Josephine asked, looking at the contents of the hidden cupboard. "We could not help it, see? It was the blackbird who made us do it," mumbled George. "The blackbird?" asked Josephine. "Yes, you know. The blackbird. You know. You do know," he said meaningfully, looking her straight in the eye. Just then, 2 further police constables arrived. These ones looked real and seemed to know whom they were after. Immediately they arrested George Grimble and Patrick Plum. Then they individually questioned everyone else. To Uncle Cosmo's surprise and dismay, they then arrested Josephine too. Cosmo could not believe it. Tears filled his eyes. "Not Josephine. No, not my Josephine," he whispered. "She wouldn't do such a thing." You could hear the pain in his voice at the very thought of Josephine being involved in this crime. One of the constables explained, "To arrest someone, sir, we need reasonable grounds to suspect they are involved in a crime. Having questioned everyone here, it is our reasonable belief that this woman is the Blackbird. She is the ultimate mastermind behind it all. "But she called you," said Rose to the police officer. "I saw her." Rose tried to stare as hard as she could at one of the police, challenging him. He was unmoved. "Sounds like a clever double bluff to me," responded the policeman. "This is a very cunning woman. You need to be clever to trade successfully in ivory, and very clever indeed to trade in this quantity." "And what about me? Why don't you arrest me too?" asked Uncle Cosmo. "After all, I sent the package to the children." There was disbelief in his voice. "Yes," said the policeman patiently, "we did think of arresting you. But since you are handcuffed and have been beaten, we do not think it's reasonable to suspect that you led to this crime." The other children were not surprised that the police had arrested Josephine, but Rose felt very upset. She was sure that they were wrong, even though she had known Josephine for such a short time. She refused to believe her capable of having one elephant killed, let alone a herd. When the parents arrived, they were worried to find the door to the pink house wide open, but were then quickly overcome with relief to find all the children and Lucky safe and well. They hugged everyone, including Uncle Cosmo and Lucky. Uncle Crispin checked that the police had found all of the large heavy chocolate bars. He had hidden the half-eaten one separately behind the old fridge in the garage. Rose could not help but take one last longing look at the enormous quantity of chocolate. She asked the police, "Can we keep the chocolate and just give you the ivory?" The policeman smiled and explained, "At this stage, the chocolate and ivory are all part of the evidence. Perhaps after the trial, you might be able to request the return of some of the chocolate." George Grimble and Patrick Plum were led to one police car, while Josephine was led to another. As they helped her into the back seat, Josephine looked up at Uncle Cosmo. "It's not true," Josephine said. "I am not the Blackbird." Uncle Cosmo said, "Of course you wouldn't be. Impossible." He glared at the constable and then sighed as the police car door was shut. Rose was standing beside Uncle Cosmo. He put his arm around her and said, as much to himself as to Rose, "I'm sure the police will just ask her a few questions, and then she'll be free to go. They can't believe she helped those villains. I'm sure she's not involved. It's just ridiculous to think she had any control over them. The fact that she wears a Blackbird bracelet is a coincidence." Rose felt terrible when she heard this. She realized that she had included Josephine's bracelet in her account to the police. She hoped that she had not got Josephine further into trouble. But the other children remembered Josephine's voice and the crook's reaction to it. They thought the woman who had stopped the crooks with her voice alone was obviously in charge of the whole operation. And was this not a suitable end? The false policeman imprisoned behind bars, and the woman in control of them soon to be locked safely away. The Blackbird had been caught. The children could all sleep soundly that night, all except Rose.
Here is how you can help. Share the story. Adopt an animal. Visit when you can. Educate yourself. Donate to a conservation charity. To find out more about Reading for Wildlife, visit zellahunter.com or at Lady Zella Books, or follow the Reading for Wildlife YouTube channel.